What is going on, everybody? Xaenca here, back once again with another video just for you. Friendly reminder as always, if you do end up enjoying this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Avengers Endgame is upon us. Now, I, just like many of you, chose to watch it during its opening weekend. So I, just like many of you, contributed to that just absurd $357 million domestic opening weekend at the box office. Now, a few of you guys have asked me if I've seen the movie, what do I think of the movie? Well, we're gonna go over just that in this video. Now, I should have already put it somewhere in the title so you are well aware that there will be spoilers in this video. So if you haven't already seen the movie and you don't want anything spoiled, you still have time to turn back. Go away. Get the fuck out, or however else you want to word it. Now, I'm gonna try to make the points I make in the order that the events happen within the movie. I may miss some things, I may jump back and forth every now and then. We'll get specific with some scenes but not all, that kind of thing. So anyway, here we go. So we start things off with Clint Barton, Hawkeye, teaching his daughter how to shoot a bow and arrow. This was teased in the trailer, and many, including me, thought that this was Clint Barton passing the mantle of Hawkeye down to Kate Bishop. I figured this happened sometime after he already lost his family, so that he can assume the Ronin identity, which evidently is not the case. I mean, this is his daughter, his sons are over yonder with his wife who are making hot dogs. And in a very well done scene, I mean, this was a great opening scene. We see him lose his family to the Thanos snap. I mean, of everybody, Clint Barton really got the short end of the stick as far as the Thanos snap went. After the intro, we cut to Tony Stark in space. He's with Nebula, it's been 21 days, they're running out of air, although Nebula is a cyborg so it doesn't really affect her. But essentially, Tony Stark is dying, and that is the scene that we see in the trailer where he's sending a message to Pepper Potts.
I know I said no more surprises, but I was really hoping to pull off one last one.
And then he passes out. Nebula sits him on the chair, basically just were to assume that he's about to die. And then we get our first dose of cringe within the movie, because we see this light that's waking Tony Stark up, and we're like, what the hell is that? The camera cuts to what Tony Stark is looking at, and what do we get? Yay, standing ovation, it's Captain Marvel, our hero. And I kid you not, when they showed her, you could hear the groans in the theater. Granted, mine was probably the loudest. I'm just like, ugh, this bitch again. But I could hear like all around people going like, ugh. And it was one of those moments where I was like, man, if only I could record in the theater. Because I'm telling you, man, people were not pleased with that reveal, and it would have been nice to capture on camera, that's all I'm saying. So Carol Danvers, for whatever reason, was just flying her jolly ass through space and just happened to bump into Tony Stark's ship. Because as we all know, the universe is tiny like that, you know what I mean? So she carries the entire ship with Tony Stark and Nebula in it all the way back down to Earth, and yay, she saves Tony Stark, guys, what a hero. We then get the entire scene that I talked about in a recent video that was shown at CinemaCon, the one where we got half of in the second trailer that came out for the movie. The one where she storms out, they ask where she's going, she's like, I'm gonna go kill Thanos. Audible groans can be heard once again in the theater. And I just want to point out one thing from that scene, because I did not talk about it when I last talked about this scene, but seeing it in a movie again reminded me, so here's the part of the scene that I'm referring to.
Because before you didn't have me.
Hey, new girl, everybody in this room is about that superhero life. And if you don't mind my asking, where the hell have you been all this time?
There are a lot of other planets in the universe. And unfortunately, they didn't have you guys.
Now, this fell flat when I was just reading the description of the scene that we went over in that previous video. It fell flat when I saw it in the trailer, and it fell flat when I saw it in the movie. Because ultimately her excuse is all, there's plenty other planets that need saving and they don't all have you guys, right? Well, dumbass, this resulted in all those planets losing half of their goddamn existence, so what was more catastrophic that you had to deal with? I mean, was Galactus out there at another planet trying to destroy 51% or more of the universe? Or is Captain Marvel not the Mary Sue we all thought she was because she's dumb as fuck? And that's her character flaw, that she doesn't have the basic comprehension to understand how to weigh your priorities? Just saying. Anyway, they all get on the Benatar, they all go out into space to go after Thanos at the Garden. Captain Marvel, our hero, leads the charge in a surprise attack against Thanos where she ends up getting him in a chokehold. The Avengers then come help restrain Thanos. We then learn that Thanos using the gauntlet a second time that they all saw on the radar was to in fact destroy the Infinity Stones. Now that he's gotten what he wanted, Thanos claimed that the stones were just temptation, so he had to destroy them. Learning that they now have no way to bring anybody back, in a fit of rage, Thor chops Thanos' head off, which I thought was pretty cool. I chuckled in my head. I knew it was not the right time to do that, but those kind of things make me laugh for some reason, so I held back my laughter. Kind of like a in my head, you know what I mean? And I think it was Rocket who's like, what did you do? And Thor's like, I went for the head. So call back to Infinity War. Obviously, we all wanted him to go for the head in this scene. But you can't always get what you want, I suppose. Side note, by the way, before we move on, seeing Thanos as a farmer peasant was jarring as fuck. I mean, I know that was a callback to the whole Adam Warlock in the comics thing, but it was weird, man. We then cut to 5 years later where we see that the world is in turmoil from the devastation of the Thanos snap, essentially. Abandoned cars randomly in the streets, empty boats, so on and so forth. We see that people are trying to move on. Captain America's leading a support group for people who are trying to get through this whole thing. We see that the Avengers are trying to get back to normal, going on missions and so on and so forth again. We see Brie Larson's Captain Marvel complete her transformation into becoming Justin Bieber's stunt double, and the thing that she hates the most, a white dude. I read a comment the other day that was like, bitch looks like she has a Lego head. And I was just like, oh my god, she does. But this is basically where she's like, I'm investigating other planets right now. I don't know if I'm going to be back anytime soon. And this is where I'm like, thank God, please go investigate other planets. Don't come back. I think at this point you've only been on the screen for 10 minutes, but I'm already sick of you. We get a first hint from Rhodes talking to Black Widow that Clint Barton has assumed the Ronin identity, talking about dead cartel bodies popping up. In this same scene, we see some of the best acting from Scarlett Johansson I've seen in a long time, where we see her kind of falling apart from the whole situation. This is where Ant-Man shows up at the Avengers base. Shortly before this, we had a continuation of the post-credits scene we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where Paul Rudd's character Scott Lang pops up out of the quantum realm. He was in there the whole time since the Ant-Man and the Wasp post-credit scene. So this is where we get the movie's whole plot device, because to Ant-Man it's only been 5 hours, to everybody else it's been 5 years, so he's like, time and space does not work the same in the quantum realm, so what if we could navigate that and go back in time, essentially? Well, who has the brains to figure something like that out? Well, Tony Stark, of course, who in this 5 years later future now has a daughter with Pepper Potts, who turned out to be ridiculously adorable. That kid cracked everyone in the theater up. But the whole point of this was to show that Tony Stark has stakes now. He has something to lose. So he's reluctant to help, knowing that he might alter something that has to do with him having a family in this future. So they go to the next big brain character in the Avengers, and who is it going to be? It is the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, who, god damn it, they castrated in this movie. Because, I mean, we all already kind of expected him to go Professor Hulk, but there's Professor Hulk, and then there's whatever the hell was in that movie. I mean, the character was funny, he made me laugh, but that's not my Hulk. That was like Soy Boy Hulk or something, I don't know what the hell that was. Anyway, Tony figures out what they need, so he decides to help the Avengers after all. They go try to get the other Avengers to come help them. So basically, Black Widow goes and seeks out Hawkeye, who has now assumed the Ronin identity. We see a cool scene where he's just basically chopping down some Yakuza, it looked like. We saw the end of this scene in the trailer. And then we get to see Thor, who was the second character they castrated in this movie. He's become fat, he's become a drunkard, he's emotionally weak, his beard's all scruffy now. It's just like, what the hell? So you laugh at first, you see it and you're just like, what the hell's going on? But then it just becomes sad and you're just like, wow, they really killed this character. So we get fat homeless Thor. Anyway, they get the band back together. We figure out that they're going to use time travel to fix the problems. But here's where plot problems become a thing, because they actually explain to you what their rules of time travel are. In a scene where we learn that Rhodey is probably a bigger film buff than any of us, they essentially make fun of the concepts of time travel we see in Back to the Future, Hot Tub Time Machine, basically the time travel method where if you go back and change something, it alters your present. Basically saying there is no butterfly effect, and instead there are multiple timelines. So if you go back and alter something, it changes the trajectory of that timeline and so on and so forth. We'll come back to why that's a problem later. But the plot is they need to go to different points in time and different places in time where the Infinity Stones existed individually. They will then take the stones from those timelines back to their current timeline and use the stones to restore everybody that was snapped away by Thanos. So they're all talking about different times and places where the stones existed, and this is where my first gripe with the plot comes into play, because Nebula explains that the Soul Stone is on Vormir, but she decides to leave out that you need to sacrifice somebody that you love in order to get the Soul Stone. I mean, what the hell was that? I mean, she knows that Thanos had to kill Gamora in order to get the Soul Stone. She brings it up later on in the movie. You'd think this would be a perfect time to bring that up, so maybe you can brainstorm and try to figure out if there is any other way. Maybe somebody knows. Who knows? Just bring it up. Anyway, 3 of the stones are in New York, so they go back to the events of the first Avengers movie. 1 is in Asgard, so they go back to the events of Thor Dark World. And 2 are in outer space, one of which is the aforementioned Soul Stone, and the other is the Power Stone that we saw in Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, in New York, we see that Bruce Banner is trying to get the Time Stone from the Ancient One, from Doctor Strange, if you're wondering who the hell I'm talking about. But she essentially reinforces that whole idea of their rules of time travel, saying like, oh, it's gonna split the times and so on and so forth. She doesn't want to give the Time Stone at first, but she eventually does when Bruce Banner explains that Doctor Strange gave the Time Stone to Thanos, and she's like, but Doctor Strange is supposed to be the best of us, so here you go. We see a really cool Captain America versus Captain America fight here when Captain America is trying to get the Mind Stone. Past Captain America assumes that this Captain America is Loki in disguise, and they get into it. It's pretty cool. Meanwhile, Tony Stark and Ant-Man botch getting the Tesseract, which ends up in the hands of Loki, which is how I'm going to assume they're going to explain how he survives and gets his own show on that Disney Plus streaming thing. But because Iron Man and Ant-Man botch getting the Tesseract and they only have enough Pym particles to go back to the future, pun intended, they instead choose to use the remaining Pym particles to go back to the 1970s to get more Pym particles from Hank Pym at the same military base where the Tesseract is at, where Howard Stark is at. We get to see Tony Stark talk to Howard Stark from the past, and we get to see Captain America see his true love in Agent Carter once again. Now from here, if you didn't see how Captain America's end was coming, I don't know what to tell you, because I thought he was going to stay right then and there. In Asgard, we see more character butchering for Thor. You know what I mean? He's still emotionally weak. He still looks like a homeless fat guy. Now even Rocket Raccoon is his superior as far as like emotional dominance goes. While Thor gets distracted by his mom and ends up having a conversation with her, Rocket Raccoon uses an extractor to extract the Reality Stone from Jane Foster, who you may or may not recall became the host of the Ether in Thor Dark World. I did laugh when Rocket Raccoon was running away from the guards and they were like chasing him, saying like, get that rabbit. That was great. In space, Nebula and War Machine are going after the Power Stone that Star-Lord was going after in Guardians of the Galaxy. We also learn here that Nebula is connected to the same neural network as past Nebula, so they're sharing memories at this point, which I don't really know how any of that works. I just suspended my disbelief for that, and I'm just like, alright, so she had no way to disconnect from the network. Whatever. This essentially alerts past Thanos, Nebula, and Gamora that future Nebula is now here trying to get the stone. They also use the network to see what happens in the future, and they see that Thanos succeeds in wiping out half of the universe and has his head chopped off by Thor. So Thanos sends past Nebula to go after future Nebula. Future Nebula and War Machine are ready to go back to the future because they retrieved the Power Stone, but I guess Nebula's brain was hacked or whatever, and she's not able to go back to the future. She is captured by past Nebula, and past Nebula basically assumes her role and goes back to the future in her place. Now the Soul Stone scene, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So Black Widow and Hawkeye go to Vormir, they climb the mountain and do all that nonsense. They meet up with Red Skull, who explains that, you know, you have to trade a soul for a soul. Basically the soul of someone you love in order to get the Soul Stone. And this scene was really well done. Maybe it wouldn't have played out as well if they already knew that somebody had to be sacrificed. Maybe that's why the directors chose to not have Nebula tell them, but it's just an awfully big thing to forget to mention, like, oh god damn it, I forgot to tell you. You know what I mean? Like, one of you has to die if you go. And for those that were like, well, how do they love each other exactly? Well, in the MCU, the Avengers have been together for so long, they're essentially a family, so they all have to have at least something for each other, you know what I mean? It could be familial, you know what I mean? It could be just like in a family way, like we love each other. But Hawkeye and Black Widow specifically, at least in the comics, were together in the past. They never explored that so much in the MCU, but to me, I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Not gonna lie, I did get a little bit teary here. I was just like, god, that is so infuriating. But Black Widow essentially succeeds in killing herself over Hawkeye here. Hawkeye brings back the Soul Stone along with everybody else coming back to the present, bringing their stones, and they have all the stones now. In another kind of plot hole here, in Infinity War, they kind of explained that Peter Dinklage's character was a dwarf, a master forger, who on Nidavellir, or whatever the hell it was, was forced by Thanos to make the Infinity Gauntlet because only with the master forgery of dwarven caliber forged by a star could a gauntlet be created that could wield the Infinity Stones. Well, apparently not, because Tony Stark makes a gauntlet out of nanotech and it wields the stones just fine, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Now Thor volunteers to use the gauntlet here because he's just like, I want to do at least one good thing, you know, and they don't let him because they think he's an emotional wreck. Which, I mean, realistically, he would be the one most qualified to do it because he took a full force of a star in Infinity War. He is the strongest among them. Instead, they get Soy Boy Hulk to do it, who snaps and basically gets like half of his body burnt to a crisp by doing it, but it works. We get confirmation that it worked by Hawkeye receiving a phone call from his wife. We now see that past Nebula, who has assumed the role of future Nebula, has come to the present, has infiltrated the Avengers base, and through the Avengers-built time machine, brings Thanos and his entire army from 2014 to 2023. Which is another plot hole because you're just like, where in the hell did they get all the Pym particles for that? It's like, what is going on? Anyway, Thanos' ship shoots the Avengers base, blows the whole thing up, and then we get the final showdown, essentially, where Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor walk out to Thanos and they start the epic battle. God damn it, I knew I forgot something. So in Asgard, Thor summons Mjolnir from the past, takes it back to the future, so now he has Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. Which makes you wonder how in the hell Mjolnir still thought he was worthy in his condition at the time, but whatever. Thor charging up Iron Man's blast, you know, the things open up and he just shoots electricity into it, which powers up the proton cannon, so on and so forth. Thor smacking Mjolnir into Thanos with his Stormbreaker, but it hits Iron Man, but still that was pretty cool. Now there's one thing I don't know how I feel about it. It was cool to see, but I don't know how I feel about it. But it was when Thor was being pinned down by Thanos and he was trying to summon Mjolnir to knock Thanos back. We see Mjolnir fly towards Thanos, hit him in the head, but then proceed to go to Captain America. So basically, Mjolnir decides that Captain America is worthy. And I mean, I guess he would be, and I guess in this condition, Thor is pretty pathetic, so I mean, Mjolnir is just like, yo, I mean, I gotta go to someone who deserves me, you know what I mean? Which adds to the castration of the Thor character, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Eventually, throughout the whole thing, Thanos brings down his armies. He's like, I'm gonna wipe out this planet, I'm gonna wipe out the universe. And this is where you see the golden swirls revealed that bring everybody into the fight from different areas. We see Black Panther come, Spider-Man, all the people that were lost in the Thanos snap back into the fight, and this is where the theater applauded. And this is also where I spoke too soon, because I was just like, wow, Captain Marvel's not here, thank God. We might actually get an ending that the Avengers deserve. I must say, they finally gave Scarlet Witch some love here, some long-deserved, much-needed love. Because if you read the comics as I did as a kid, you would know that Scarlet Witch is a lot more powerful than they're making her out to be in the MCU. And they finally show that here as Scarlet Witch goes one-on-one against Thanos and basically whoops his ass. And I was like, hell yeah, go Scarlet Witch, until Thanos has to call an airstrike down onto the planet, risking his own troops to escape Scarlet Witch. But while the ship's shooting down, eventually the ship starts shooting straight into space, and you're like, oh no. The characters are like, whoa, what's the ship shooting at? And lo and behold, here comes Captain Marvel. And I was really just like, no, it was going so well, why? Because she comes down in typical Mary Sue fashion, unstoppable, OP as shit, flies through the mothership, destroys it in like 2 seconds, and you're just like, god damn it. As quickly as she destroyed that ship is as quickly as she removed a full letter grade from this review. Telling you that much. Because we knew that was not the extent of her appearance, right? Because this is the moment where they had Hawkeye trying to bring the Infinity Gauntlet to the quantum machine or whatever the hell it was, and it was taken over by Black Panther, eventually taken over by Spider-Man, and now Captain Marvel's here, guys. No need to worry, she'll take care of it. Peter Parker's like, hi, I'm Peter Parker. And she's like, hello, Peter Parker. I'm Carol Danvers. And Spider-Man's like, I don't know how you're gonna get through all those guys. And in the cringiest part I've ever seen in a Marvel movie, the camera pans out and all the ladies of Marvel are backing up Captain Marvel, saying like, she's got help, and then it goes into an all women's montage of them clearing out the way for Carol Danvers. Mind you, this is a war situation, so they were all in their own individual battles. They all stopped what the hell they were doing, and they went to Captain Marvel's aid. And I'm like, after pulling off such a powerful scene and what you did with Scarlet Witch, you give us this nonsense. And I'm just like, God, I threw up a little bit in my mouth, I think. And then we have Captain Marvel fighting Thanos, and I was just, oh my god, at this point I was done. Because you see him get a hold of the stones, and you see Captain Marvel trying to pull the stones away from him, and Thanos headbutts her, and she doesn't flinch. What the fuck is that? Like, after 10 years of buildup, that's how you're gonna show off the villain you've been building up to? Mind you, without even using the stones, Thanos is as strong as Hulk. And I'm not talking Professor Hulk or like barely angry Hulk. I'm talking fully angry, full strength Hulk. You know that scene in Infinity War where Thanos is beating the shit out of Hulk? That is not with him using the stones. That is just him, pure strength, beating the shit out of Hulk and throwing him into outer space. But he headbutts Captain Marvel and no flinch, no damage done. It just cuts to her face like, yeah, that did nothing. And I'm just like, god damn it, this is so stupid. And then you're gonna say, but he punched her away. Yeah, after he took out the stone, put it in his other hand, used the stone to punch her away. That whole fight playing out was disgusting, man. I was so disgusted by that. I was like, Jesus Christ, what have you done? And then we got a little bit of foreshadowing when Tony asked Doctor Strange, like, yo, you remember you looked into 14 million possibilities? Is this the one where we win? And Doctor Strange is like, if I tell you what happens, it won't happen. And I'm like, yeah, Tony's about to die. And rightfully so. I mean, the whole MCU started with Tony. It's only befitting that it ends with Tony as well. Now, it doesn't really make sense how he was able to wield the gauntlet with the stones as a human without it killing him. Now, it did end up killing him, but that's after he used it. I mean, we've seen just wielding it, the damage it does on you. Like, Peter Quill, Star-Lord, was not even able to wield the Power Stone by itself without it nearly killing him. And he's Ego's son, so he has that blood running through him. But I was willing to ignore this, because I was like, alright, whatever, we need Iron Man to finish this, fine, give that I am Iron Man line, do your snap, and wipe away Thanos' army. Obviously, this was a very emotional moment, got teary again, and I was just like, man, this is it, man, this is it. Rest in peace to the MCU. We see Tony's funeral, and that is the send-off, man, that is the send-off. And the whole time I was watching that funeral play out, and I was like, man, if this is how it ends, I'm fine with that. We then see Captain America basically saying that he's gonna go travel back in time and bring the stones back to where they got them from. But when they try to bring him back, he doesn't come back, and we're like, oh, he stayed in the past. And the way we learn this is old man Steve Rogers is sitting on the bench right by where they sent him back to the past just moments ago. And I was face palming at this point. I'm just like, you went through so much trouble explaining the rules to us. Changing the past doesn't change the present, you guys. It branches off a different alternate timeline that has nothing to do with us. So why does Steve Rogers going back in time staying there keep him in the same timeline? Like, what the hell are you talking about? But whatever, Steve is like, yeah, I decided to give this whole getting a life thing a try, so he stayed with Agent Carter, to which we got to see them dancing in the past. We saw who he finally chose to give the shield to. Essentially, who is he going to pass the role of Captain America to, and it was really easy to see who he was gonna pick based on woke Disney Marvel, you know what I mean? It was either Sam or Bucky. And I was really fine with either choice. It's just, it's not surprising. When he picked Sam, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Because if he picked Bucky, my response would have just been, wow, that's surprising. Again, did not really matter to me. Somebody has to be Captain America moving forward. And woke Disney Marvel decided it was going to be the black dude, even though I thought he was better as Falcon, but whatever. Then we got Thor passing on Asgard to Valkyrie, which, I mean, it's another white dude passing on their role to a minority character. Just a little bit on the nose, but whatever. They've been on the nose for the rest of this stuff, so just like, whatever. Then Thor goes out into outer space with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in this movie was excellent. Actually, I would say everybody's performance was excellent, minus Brie Larson. And I'm not saying that because I don't like her. I'm saying that because she's miscast for this role. She's the only character I could not take seriously in this whole thing. I'm Captain Marvel. It doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. Like, what was this casting?
It doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes, but I'm very comfortable with that and allowing myself to learn from those mistakes.
Like I said, she removed at least a letter grade and a half probably. She was only in this thing for 15 minutes and it was 15 minutes too goddamn long. And you knew while watching this, just 15 minutes, that this was the bare minimum. This was the cut that had the least to do with her participation. And it was still unbearable. It was just like, God, get her off the screen. I don't know how any of you managed to sit through that Captain Marvel. It was just her and Nick Fury. Jesus Christ. So it was just Captain Marvel, Thor, and Hulk that I had issues with as far as this movie. I mean, Hulk wasn't able to do anything. Like, Hulk deserved a Scarlet Witch-like moment because that was the whole point of Infinity War, was the Hulk was afraid of Thanos because he got his ass kicked. Like, I would have liked to see an equivalent beatdown on Thanos that resulted in him having to go through some kind of desperate measure as well to escape Hulk, you know what I mean? And I can't help that what they did to Thor, completely castrating the character, was to basically take away power from him to make Captain Marvel look stronger. Like, I feel like they did that so there is no question, yeah, Captain Marvel is the strongest. It's just like, that is low. That is so low. Was Star Wars story. But I was fine with all of the other characters for the most part. I mean, with Captain Marvel removing a letter and plot holes removing a letter, I feel like I would give this movie somewhere between like a 7 and an 8, which is still fine. It's still a good movie. It's just not the masterpiece we all wanted it to be. Infinity War was just a much better movie in my opinion. That would be closer to like the 9.5 range for me. But not everybody would agree with that. I understand that. That's just my opinion. But Avengers Endgame was a serviceable end to the MCU in my opinion. So no, I wouldn't say that Captain Marvel completely ruined Avengers Endgame, but she definitely made it a lot worse without a doubt, and somehow managed to do it with only 15 minutes of screen time, which is quite impressive. I'm still emotionally shook from the whole Tony Stark thing. I'm just like, man, that was hard to watch. And I'm happy to say that the way it ended, I don't need to watch any Phase 4 movie. If this was the last Marvel movie I watched, I'm fine with that. It did its job in what it needed to do to close this book for me. Now, I know that Feige and them keep saying that this is just the end of the chapter, not the end of the book. Well, to me, it's the end of the book because I'm really not interested in woke Phase 4 the way it's looking. But that's gonna be it for my review. I know it went on a little bit long, but I get a little bit ranty after I watch movies, but what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below if you did end up enjoying this long-ass video. Hopefully you did. If you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends, family, whoever you think would be interested in nonsense like this. And subscribe, ring that notification bell, and click that always so you can always be alerted every time I put out another one of these butter garlic shrimps. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.